Today we're talking about worship. Hi, my name is Aminata Coote. Thank you for joining me today on my channel. I hope that you'll learn something new. If you've been a believer for any length of time, I'm sure you've heard the phrase worship in spirit and in truth. And maybe you're wondering, what does that mean, right? Because how do you worship something in spirit or someone in spirit? And how do you worship in truth? Is there a false way of worshiping? And we're going to answer some of those questions today, but we're going to focus specifically on using Revelations 4 verse 11 to do so. So here we go. I'm going to be reading Revelation 4 verse 11 from the King James Version of the Bible. Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created. Now, if you know anything about me, you're going to know that I love to go into the original languages. And I have a blog post which I'll link in the description, which goes through each of the words that we're going to focus on. So let's talk about it. Who is this verse referencing? Now, if you read the entire chapter of Revelations 4, you'll see that this is actually referenced into Jesus. Because there are four creatures. John saw four creatures in heaven, and all they were doing was just worshiping God. All they were saying is, holy, 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 Lord God Almighty. And that's basically, that was their whole purpose. And when they started praising and worshiping, then the 24 elders also fell down and they worshiped before God. So it makes you wonder, what's the big deal? Why are we worshiping God? Why do we need to worship him? Why do we need to worship Jesus? And this verse gives you the entire answer to that. It says because we worship Jesus because he is worthy to be worshipped. He is worthy to get all the glory. He's worthy to get all the honor. He's worthy to get all the praise, and he's worthy to get all power. Now, what made Jesus worthy, you may ask? Well, it goes all the way back to the sacrifice that he made. Now, Jesus came from heaven. He gave up all of that. He gave up immortality. He gave up all the power that he had. He gave up all of that. And he came to earth and he died for us. And I always say, Jesus didn't wait until things were good. He didn't wait until they had modern hospitals and, anesthesia and clean facilities. He came in a time when things were hard, guys. I mean, there was just natural childbirth. There were no epidural injections. There was just Mary and the baby. That's it. And probably some cows and donkeys looking on. And that's another thing too. He had the option of being born in a royal family. I mean, he could have come through an actual king's family, but he didn't. He came to one of David's descendants who was so far away from the throne that people didn't even remember that there was a connection between his ancestor and David. You understand? And Jesus came to this person. He came here. He gave up all of his glory and he gave up all of his power. And when he came here, we treated him so badly. I mean, we didn't give him the honor that he deserved. His own people, they questioned his lineage. They talked about him. They wondered, who was this man? Why are you worthy? Why are you here? Why do I need to listen to you? I know your mother. I know your father. I know your brothers and your sisters. So why am I listening to you? And that was the kind of life that God lived for us. That was the kind of life that Jesus lived for us. And it's fitting because when he did that, after he made the decision to go through with his death, and his father raised him up, he was given all the glory and the honor and the praise. And that is why we worship Jesus. That is why we worship God, because hear what? He is worthy of our praise because he's the creator God. He's worthy of our praise because he was the only person who died for our sins. He's worthy of our praise because the truth is, whether we want to admit it or not, without Jesus, we are nothing. We are dust. In fact, we're less than dust because he made dust too. So if we don't believe in Christ, if Jesus is not God, then we don't exist. You know what? This is the matrix, y'all. If Jesus don't exist, we're in the matrix, and that's it. That's the truth. Because it means that everything that we know would be a lie. Everything that we know would be false. Everything that we know would be non-existent. And you see, that is why it is so important for us to worship God. We worship him not because of anything that we want to achieve from him or that we want to receive from him, but we simply worship God because he's God. We worship him because he is the creator. I was telling my son this morning that, either you're going to believe that God always existed, or you're going to believe a theory that out of nothing came something, and that nothing changed into so many different things that it boggles the mind. So either we're going to believe that God always was, and he was self-existent, and he always existed, and he created mankind, and he created the universe, and he created everything in it, or we're going to have to try to figure out, where did the nothing come from? How did the nothing become something? And how did the nothing become so many different things? And why can't I make something out of nothing now? You see in my head, y'all, it's just easier to worship Christ. It is easier to worship him because I know that he is a creator God, and I know that everything he made on earth, he did that, and he designed it for his pleasure and for his glory. And that's something that alone is enough for you to worship him. Now, in case you're wondering, how do we worship God? I'm going to give you 4 key tips. The first way that we worship God is by kneeling before him. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. How is kneeling before God worshiping in spirit and truth? I mean, isn't that what I said at the beginning of the video? Yeah, it is. When we kneel down before God, it's not just about a physical act. It's not just about, I'm going to go down on my knees because it's the right thing to do. We're kneeling down before God because we're showing him that, look, this is my position before you. I am humbling myself before you. I am choosing to subject myself before you. I've heard this pastor, Henry White, he always says, God, if I was on my face flat before you, I would still be too high. And that's the attitude. It's not a physical prostration that we're doing. It's a prostration of the heart. And that's my second tip for worshiping God. It's about the condition of our hearts. You see, we can do all the right things. We can say all the right things. But if our hearts are not right, it don't make no sense. It don't make no sense. If your heart is not right, then do not bow down. Do not pretend to worship, because you know what? God don't like that, y'all. Jesus do not like it. He don't like fake worshiping. That's where the false worship comes in. If you are not worshiping out of a genuine heart of love and desire to be in God's presence, if you're not worshiping out of a craving to be before God, then you're worshiping falsely, and your worship is not in truth. The third way that you can worship God is through service. Now, in case you don't know what your spiritual gifts are, I'm going to link the playlist below because I have a whole series on what the spiritual gifts are. When we get these gifts are not given for our benefit. These gifts are given for the glory of God. You see, God did not put us out here or put us on earth for us to serve ourselves. If you remember back in Eden when he created Adam, the first thing he did was he gave Adam a job. He said, look, here's a garden, go tend it. And I'm sure, I'm not a gardener or anything, but I'm sure that that perfect garden did not need any tending. Because if at that time the earth was actually watering itself, there were no weeds, I really don't know what he was out there doing. But it's the principle of the thing. God wanted mankind to know that when he created us, he gave us a purpose. He didn't create us to be hedonists. He didn't create us to just have fun and not do anything else. He created us to actually use work as an act of worship, as an act of service. It goes into the whole process of, or the whole point of our being stewards. You see, as stewards, we're given care of these things. So as a steward of God, we are given care of the gifts and talents that he has given us. And while we're on the topic of stewardship, that includes our money, that includes our time, that includes our resources. We are given these gifts so that we can actually use them to be a minister to other people. And finally, we can worship God through our words. Now, again, it has to stem from a good condition of the heart. If your heart is not in the right place, then do not use your words. It's better for you to keep silent than for you to sin against God by worshiping him in form, but not of heart. You don't want him to say about you, that these people call on my name, but they don't know me. I don't know them. Their hearts are far from me. You don't want God to say that to you. So when you're worshiping God through your words, it's stemming from, the abundance of your heart. It overflows, and it comes out in words of praise. It comes out in words of affirmation. It comes out in songs and in spiritual songs, in hymns, and just praise. And there's a link. That is why praise and worship are so closely connected, because praise is an act of worshiping God, and worship involves praising God. So, I hope you understand now how you need to worship God and why you worship God. And if you need to know more about how Revelation 4 verse 11 ties in with worship, I'm going to go ahead and link that blog post in the description box below so that you can go ahead and read that post. So now it's your turn. How do you worship God? Until next time, this is Ami, and I'm encouraging you to know God, know yourself, run your race.